Hello everybody, I'm Jerry Gatka, your host, and my co-host.
Chantel Fielder.
And we're going to be talking today to Amy Bonacorso, who is a Catholic astrologer who wrote a book. You'll see. You have to wait and see. We'll be right back.
You don't want to miss it.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Jerry Gatka, for the Top of the Morning Show. And my co-host today, please.
Chantel Fielder.
Chantel Fielder. And Chantel's going to help me interview our guest today, who is Amy Bonacorso, who is an astrologer, and has written a book about dating. I'm not quite sure how those two things go together.
Yes, well, in 2008, I published How to Get to I Do, a dating guide for Catholic women. And it won an award from the Catholic Press Association, which was just so wonderful. So I've done the Catholic media circuit, basically trying to help devout Catholic women find a marriage partner. And but the story is that I was actually raised in a more metaphysical type of household, and was raised with astrology. So I converted to the Catholic faith in college and went through a whole bunch of transitions. And
but it's okay to believe in the stars and heaven.
Well, it's a complicated topic. I started researching the history more, and there's actually a lot of history of astrology in the Catholic Church. So it's quite fascinating, really, quite confusing. But after researching things and doing a lot of soul searching, talking to a priest friend, I decided, I'm going to take this leap here. So I have an audience who still is into my book, and then I've got some other folks who are more interested in my
let's talk about your book first.
Okay.
Your book is a guide for dating for Catholics.
Yes.
Can anybody else read it too?
Oh, sure, definitely. But I realized when I was in my 20s and dating in the Catholic scene, we had a lot of very specific issues for us that were difficult.
For example?
Well, we want to find a guy who is as devout as we are, for example, and sometimes that can be hard to do. So there are lots of...
Do they exist?
they do exist, but sometimes what has to occur is that if a woman is having a hard time finding somebody as devout as herself, she has to do some soul searching and may have to compromise on a few things. Maybe somebody isn't as into the faith as she is, stuff like that. So it can be a very intense experience.
Chantel, are you single?
Yes.
And is this an issue for you to find a partner who is of the same faith, perhaps, or of the same issues?
Yes, I think many women in our generation, we face the challenge of finding someone who's on the same mental plane as you. Not just spiritually, but you want to make sure they have the same values and goals, and that you guys see eye to eye on a lot of issues that are important to you. So someone developing a book that kind of addresses that, especially when you're younger and you don't always want to do things the way you're taught, but you kind of want to still maintain a sense of identity and moral code. That is definitely a guideline that will help us.
Amy, can you give me an idea of what some of the chapters relate to and some of the topics that you cover?
Let's see, let's crack it open. Well, a big one is online dating. That's a really big issue these days, helping people get comfortable with online dating. And I also coach women one-on-one, and one of the big things is fear of online dating. But a lot of times once they get over that fear, they're able to meet a lot of really great guys.
I assume there's lots of rules in terms of being safe.
Oh, sure, definitely. I mean, I totally suggest meeting in a public place initially and asking lots of good questions and all those great things. But these days, even if you live in a very populated area, we're all so busy. We're all so busy that it can be really hard sometimes to meet the type of person that you really want to meet, and online dating can help you narrow things down.
I assume the initial stage has to be that you have to be ready and willing and wanting to get to that point, to be dating as opposed to carrying out your career.
Yeah, you have to make a conscious decision that this is what you want to do, because that's another challenge these days. Life is so busy that people can easily forget about their family goals.
So you do seminars and this sort of thing too?
I do one-on-one coaching mainly,
Okay.
And I've done a lot of radio shows, and so that...
How to get to I do. Does it involve handcuffs or guns or something?
No, not at all.
How do you convince a guy, the right guy, with the right mindset and the right values and whatnot, to get to I do?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of men are still interested in getting married and having families, but I do talk about managing one's time in the book for ladies who really are at the point where they want to get married. I think if the guy they're dating isn't really interested, they have to manage their time and perhaps move on if that's the case. But yeah.
Chantel, astrology. Do you know a whole lot about that? I don't.
How about we take a quick break, because that could take a while.
Okay, let's do that. We'll be back in a minute. Back, everybody. Jerry Getka, your host, with our guest today is Amy Bonacorso and my co-host Chantel. And we've talked about your book. Now I want to talk about Amy, not the author, but Amy the astrologer.
Yes.
You talked about Catholic astrology. Are there mentions of that in the Bible? I mean, what are the references?
Well, the Magi were astrologers.
Really?
Yeah, but we also call them the wise men. So that's a really important part of Scripture that a lot of times people don't necessarily want to focus on. But they were looking at the sky, and they knew something about the planets and the stars.
So if I'm looking up at the sky and completely ignoring everything here, I'm called wise. I like that.
And so the Magi are very inspirational for me personally because of that. Because God chose the Magi astrologers to find Christ, and that's just really beautiful. But also, I've discovered that there's a long history of astrology in the church. There were 4 popes in particular who had court astrologers. And we also have a few saints who used astrology. Albert the Great is one, and John Scotus is beatified, but he was known to be a very serious astrologer.
How can this be used in today's world?
Well, one very important aspect, I think, is childbirth. It's really important to, unless there are severe medical complications or issues, to allow a child to come when the child wants to be born. These days we're seeing an increased instances of mothers planning C-sections just for convenience. And even if somebody isn't really interested in astrology, trust me, we're all born at a specific time for a reason, and we really should allow that to occur. Ecclesiastes says there's a time to be born, and we have to trust that.
A time to be born, you say that affects or enhances or tells you things about that person's life?
Certainly. Another really interesting aspect, though, is that people can inherit traits through their astrology chart from their family members. So I also see how there can be family dynamics that are being put in place depending on when the time
I'm not quite sure I understand that. Chantel, could you?
I'm a little bit of a, I guess a dork about this because I love the subject. There's something about quantum physics and astrology and just the spiritual aspect of life that is so definitive in our lives. Mm-hmm. And you know what you're saying is absolutely true. There's a hypnotic rhythm that each person carries, and you know their astrology can affect that, and then their environment can affect that. Mm-hmm. So for you to tie that together with the Catholic faith, it's very inspiring because a lot of people think that it has to be completely segmented, right, and they're all intermingled. It's a very holistic approach. Mm-hmm.
So. How does the church view this?
Well, it's an interesting and confusing topic, I must say, because, for example, in the Catechism, there's a line that says no astrology. However, there was a Jesuit in the, I think he passed away maybe in the 90s or early 2000s, who taught astrology at a Catholic college, and he wrote an essay that you can find online. It's the Old Astrology and the New Catechism, where he explains that, you know, most people talking about astrology these days they're not really speaking about old world, super detailed astrology charts. Okay. So there's a lot of confusion, misinformation, and it's an area that I think needs to be explored a bit more, which is why I'm doing my work.
How would you define astrology today in this context?
Well, in my context, in the context of most professional astrologers, it's very detailed. We do very highly detailed work where we take a person's birth time, birth date exact, and construct a very detailed birth chart for them and can work with them in a very detailed level that is not reflected in the newspaper horoscopes. Oh. That's where things
That's
get
my
confusing.
only exposure to this.
Yeah. And they're very different things. I mean, they're just a world apart. So when I say astrology, when that Jesuit priest was teaching astrology at a college level, he was doing something very detailed that was more common in old world.
And not accepted in the church so much.
Well, back in the old days, it was a lot of times. I mean, there was room for disagreement is what I have found. Some saints didn't like it. Some saints did like it.
No, I don't want to talk about things that people didn't like. Chantel, have you had this done? Have you charted your stars? And however the language is, I'm not sure.
I know I have back in college, you know, but definitely not in the same context and in the same depth that you're, you know, implying. I think that a lot of times we kind of get prone to the horoscopes when we're just looking for the answer to kind of just be what we want to hear, but it's so much more than that. And I think that that's where, you come in because you've studied it and seen how historically it's way bigger than just a commercial approach to it. And that's something that, I'd love to get into.
But you say the time of day, the date, and those types of things, and the way the stars were aligned at that time.
Right.
Do they dictate or do they point to, how does that affect you
well,
and your personality?
The Christian version of astrology always honors free will. That, we have free will. At the same time, I will also say that with my experience with astrology and trying to do it as a Christian is also that there's also providence, where sometimes God is planning something for you, and whatever's going on in the stars at this time, we call them transits, things that can affect you now, can help guide you on discovering that or adjusting to that new path.
So some new person coming into your life is
Sure.
like a comet crossing.
Well, you could have a transit that it could coincide with you meeting somebody very important, or a new job, or having a child, or getting married. And
now most people, when they look at the horoscopes and whatnot, they're looking for predictors to try and, how do I live my life today, or what decision do I make on this type of thing? Can that seriously help, really?
Well, and here's where I have to be clear. There really is a difference between a newspaper horoscope, because that's such a general approach, and
it applies to everybody.
Yeah, it really does, and it can be really just very brief. But when you do something more in depth with your chart with a professional astrologer, they really are giving you a lot more information and not being so cut and dry and black and white usually. They're saying these things are going to be happening in your life, and they do it in a way to be helpful, not like this is definitely going to happen. And
well, if Chantel came to you, for example, and did this one-on-one, how long would that take?
Well, I usually take a few hours to prep on my own at home before I meet with someone, and then I meet with someone in person or over the phone for an hour. And I talk about the birth chart with them, talk about what I'm seeing with regard to transits. So for a client, it's only an hour, but I take more time preparing just to be thorough.
Chantel, you seem more familiar with this than I am. Is there something else you want to ask?
There's so much more. So I think we should take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll get into everything.
Okay. That's a good choice. We'll go from there. See you in a minute.
co-host, Jerry, and our amazing guest, Amy. And I have a quick question.
Sure.
Now, if a person believes that their thoughts are things and that our thoughts, create our reality, does that affect their chart in a way where they now have the control to say that even though this was in a sense predicted, I have some level of control as to how everything turns out?
Definitely. I think that I encourage clients to keep the most positive mindset possible, because that allows them to express the most positive side of whatever sign or planet or influence we're talking about. For example, Scorpio, a very negative aspect or potential aspect of Scorpio is addiction. However, a really positive aspect of Scorpio is transformation and resurrection and the phoenix. So if somebody is really paying attention to their life and to their thoughts and trying to have a very positive focus, they're going to be more inclined, hopefully, to harness the more positive aspects of their chart. Easy.
All of this is a little bit over my head, I think. Well, you effectively said, and let me translate this in a way that I can understand it, that fate is not predetermined.
I don't. It's hard to answer it very simply. I don't think so. I think we all have free will. At the same time, I have seen things in charts and transits where it does appear that there is something providential that's supposed to happen in someone's life, and the stars are expressing that.
Okay.
But I don't think it's a positive thing if people think of themselves as out of control and completely subject to what the stars are doing necessarily. You have to have a positive mindset and recognize that we make choices every day. They're within our power.
I find it very interesting and unusual that you tie your astrology into your faith. Mm-hmm. And putting it the way you did, saying it's something providential, mm-hmm. opens it to almost all faiths.
Yeah, definitely. And really, I think anybody who believes in God, they can have a spiritual experience by working with astrology. One example, there was a chart I was doing a while back ago, and something very tragic had happened in someone's life, and I was having a hard time finding, okay, what's this about? And I finally just stepped back and said a prayer. I'm like, God, you got to show me. And then, bam, I found it. And it was really obvious and really clear. But doing astrology as a Christian or somebody who believes in God, it's just that you're respecting that God is the creator of all of your charts and everything that's going on, and you are not worshiping the stars.
All right, you mentioned God. Mm-hmm. My first thoughts of astrology, I still think of astrology and the stars and the planets, the old gods, you know, Jupiter and the Roman gods and the Greek gods, and why can't we think of those that way today? You know, I guess I'm a romantic at heart. I just love the fantasy of the gods, and they can do things, and you can interact with them and whatnot. But that's not the case today. Why can't we? Why has that changed?
Well, I learned about that in high school, about mythology and stuff like that, but it never stuck with me. I
really?
Just didn't quite. Yeah.
How about you, Chantel?
I don't know. I think because our society kind of is very sponge-like with what we see in the media, it kind of makes a disassociation from that childlike, imaginative, allure that the mythology kind of brings.
Perhaps I spent more time in one of those lives in Greek and Roman times than either of you have. I don't know.
It is helpful to think of the planets as having personalities, though. Sometimes that helps me.
Okay, expound on that a little bit.
Well, like we can think of the moon as moon symbolizes motherhood and apple pie in the home. So sometimes if somebody's having something very rough happen with their moon, a planet is doing something that's disrupting their moon energy. It can be
their moon? Does each of us have a different moon?
Yes, we all have. Like,
oh, really?
Because at the time of our birth.
I think that's really cool. I never knew that.
Yeah, everybody has a moon sign. We all know generally our sun sign, but everybody has a moon sign too. But if somebody's having something happen with their moon, it could be a major disruption in the home.
What do you feel is the biggest change in the church today?
Well, Pope Francis is making waves, and it shouldn't be a huge surprise that he's making waves. He has moon in Aquarius. And he has Venus in Aquarius too.
A huge surprise to you, but everybody else out there that doesn't know this.
Well, yeah, but a lot of the stories in the media emphasize his different way of doing things. How
he's more Catholic, it seems, than the previous popes.
Well, he has a different way of doing things, is true. His moon in Aquarius symbolizes, it's a progressive sign, it's an unconventional sign, new way of doing things outside the box. So we're very much seeing that from him. He has also said things like he wants to make a mess out of things. And that's very Aquarius.
I'm an Aquarius, so I think that's true.
That's great. I love the sign of Aquarius, but also people love him. He has a Cancer ascendant, and that combination, his sign combination, is very similar to Princess Diana's. And what we saw with the princess is something we're seeing with Francis, where people from all walks of life felt like just this overwhelming feeling of love for Princess Diana, and she was very humanitarian, and she had a big heart. She wanted to be the Queen of Hearts. And Pope Francis also is very humanitarian. He's known for doing things with the common man, taking the train.
It certainly makes him different than a lot of the more recent popes.
And people relate to him, and they love that. They feel that he really cares about them, no matter what their status is.
And no matter what he says as well. I mean, there are people that disagree with him, but still respect and love the man.
Definitely. So his chart very much says that. And so I really enjoy Pope watching and looking at the different charts of the different popes and seeing how people respond to them, and there's always something there that's really interesting.
Can you predict anything from this? I mean, where's Pope Francis going to take us from here?
Well, I wrote an article about him right when he was elected, and because of that unconventional, unpredictable Aquarius energy, I think he's going to continue surprising us. So
now, I understand you read a lot of articles. Where can people find some of these?
My website with my astrology work is heavenlycharts.com. If you go there, you can get all the articles, and on Facebook, it's the Catholic Astrologer.
The Catholic Astrologer. Yes. Look for the Catholic Astrologer on Facebook. You'll find Amy Bonacorso. You'll get into all these interesting topics, most of which I know very little about. But I would like to pursue some of these with you in a much more a longer format, and I'm not quite sure this is the right place for that. So if you don't mind, we'll ask you to be a guest on some of our other shows on this channel.
Sure, thank you.
That'd be great. Chantel, anything else?
I can't wait to go and check out that website. There's so much that I want to learn and so much I want to do. But we had so much fun speaking with you, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Jerry Gedka. I'm here with my co-host, Chantel Fielder, and our guest today, who we've had a lot of fun talking to, Amy Bonacorso. And this is our last segment. We've only got a few minutes left. Let's show the book. Amy wrote a book. It is called How to Get to I Do, a dating guide for Catholic women. And I'll let you tell any contact information if people want to get a hold of you for the one-on-one coaching or for any of the other issues we've talked about.
Well, they can buy the book most easily on Amazon.com. It's an ebook form as well. And my website is amybonacorso.com for everything about the book and doing coaching with me.
There you go. No phone number that you want them to reach, or just go through the website?
The website's easiest.
Website's the easiest thing. That's great. One contact, one way to go, one person to see about astrology for the Catholic woman. Amy, you've been a great guest. I'm glad to have you with us today. Chantel, we had a great time learning some new things
Definitely
about. Was there any other question you want to ask Amy before we go? Oh, don't have time. We got to go. Bye-bye, everybody. We had a great time. See you later. Bye-bye.